Everyone has a book inside them. You've probably heard of that quote. The full quote by Christopher Hitchens actually is a little bit more sarcastic. Everybody has a book inside them, which is exactly where most of them should remain, or words to that effect. I sit somewhere on that that spectrum of thought as, have I got something? I'm not sure whether it's worth putting it out there. And I had the wonderful privilege to be referred to Debs Jenkins, my guest today, by one of our previous guests, David Pullen, who talked about his experience of working with her to help him to publish his book. And I thought it'd be great to speak to her, and it was. It was a really good conversation. And really, one of the threads of the conversation today is about how do you get creative thought into actual action, creative work. And that was helpful for me as someone who is considering this. I'm sure it'll be helpful for others. Maybe you're thinking about how to get a book out there, and Debs has planted some really good thoughts. Of course, as each episode features, we also explore her 3 leadership lessons. She was an engineer by profession. She switched into more creative work later in her career, and we hear a little bit about that. She also runs a farm in southern Spain, and so very multifaceted individual, lots of things to offer, wonderful energy. And I want to invite you to join us around this virtual dinner table into the conversation. And maybe you've got an idea, a thought that you'd like to transform into some literary work. And Debs might be the person that can spark that for you today. So join us. Please don't forget to share or pass this on to someone who you think would benefit from listening. Thank you. Welcome then to Debs Jenkins to our After Dinner Leadership podcast. It's lovely to speak with you, Debs.
Thanks, Simon, for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Likewise. And you're calling us from the beautiful Spain, I understand?
Yeah, from the mountains in the south of Spain, where it's very windy but bright and sunshine.
Great. And how long have you been in Spain?
So this is my 19th year now. I moved out here 19 years ago. So Spain feels more home. I've actually driven on the wrong side of the road for longer than I've driven on the right side of the road.
And I can't help asking, what brought you there? What was it about Spain that attracted you?
I'm an inner city Birmingham girl, and I really, 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 really wanted a farm. I so much wanted a farm as I was growing up. I went to this farm as a kid, at a school trip.
Yeah.
And I cows and sheep and things, and I always wanted a farm, and I just couldn't afford a farm in the UK. It was just too expensive. But in Spain, the prices were lower, more choice, more options, and so that's why I ended up in Spain, so I could have a farm.
Brilliant. And do you still have it?
Yeah, well, I had one farm, which was a cave house farm. So I lived in a cave for a while. And then I got divorced, as you do, get divorced from the troglodyte. And then I bought another farm, and that's where I live now.
Wow, amazing. All right. Well, there's I think there's an after dinner conversation right there that we'll go on to. I'd love to explore other things. Hey, we're already started learning a bit about you, and delighted to have you with us. But our tradition is always to ask a series of quick fire questions, 1 minute, see how we get on.
Okay, I'm going to try.
Okay, good on you. Here we go. Name.
Debbie Jenkins.
Organization.
The Asset Pack.
What food reminds you of your childhood?
Mashed potatoes.
What is your favourite animal?
Oh no, can't do that. Cats, dogs, horses, goats, chicken, all of them.
No favourites.
No favourites.
Okay. Who inspires you?
People who get things done.
Why is that so important?
Because it's so easy to think and not create. And people who actually make things are inspiring to me.
Great. How do you manage your stress?
Animals. They are a cause of stress and a reduction of stress, sometimes in equal measures.
If you were to describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
Oh, does that mean I don't have to answer that question?
No, the question's still there. I've started, so I've finished.
Okay. Short, very, a bit chaotic and creative.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And I want to go back to the mashed potato. Okay. What is it about the mashed potato that takes you to your childhood? Well,
It just reminds me of cozy in the house, sitting with your dinner on your lap.
yeah,
I'm a Birmingham girl. That's like mashed potatoes are just cozy and warm and
yeah,
home.
love it. All right, good. And talk to me a little bit more about the farm then. So animals, clearly animals are very important to you. There are no favourites in this household, but I would love to hear a little bit more about your farm. Is it an animal farm or arable? What have you
It's
got?
an animal farm. We have a couple of horses. I got interested in horses when I hit my 40s. My 40th birthday, I bought myself a horse. And then fell off it and broke my arm. First bone I broke at 40, not a good idea. So horses were sort of my biggest animal. Had goats and make goat's milk. And got dogs, obviously, chickens. And this is the embarrassing one. I'm going to whisper this. 22 cats. Got lots of cats.
Wow, wow. Oh, okay. So that's fantastic. Lovely to hear kind of an insight into your journey to Spain. I find that fascinating. But I really want to shift our gears a little bit to the business side of your story as well, and kind of you helping leaders and being a leader yourself. And I'd love to find out from everybody, what 3 leadership lessons do you wish you'd learned earlier?
Oh gosh. When I was trying to think down to 3, I had about 7,000 more or less. Gosh, like I wish I'd known that earlier. I wish I'd known that earlier. Okay, so I've tried to bring it down to 3, and I think these are my 3 most important ones. And I wrote them down because otherwise I would get distracted on chaotic. The first one, and I think perhaps lots of people have this one, is that you're a leader, even if you don't have the title of leader. You can be a leader. You might be leading, even though you're not team leader or CEO or you. So I wish I'd have realised that earlier. That even though I didn't class myself as a leader, people were following
Yes.
and listening to what I said and doing things, even though I didn't realise I was leading. So that was the first one, and I think that one for me. That one still surprises me. Sometimes I think, oh, I didn't realise that I was leading. I thought, I was just here for the fun, and suddenly realised that I'm in a leadership type position. So I think that's the
Great.
first one.
Thank you.
Um,
Number 2?
the second one is now this one is a good one, and it's from the
I
I'm
thought the
going to do
first
it.
one was pretty good too, Debs.
Thanks.
Just
But this one's got a quote to it. So this is the quote. And I'm going to read the quote
perfect.
out because, like, who doesn't love a good quote? I'm going to read the quote out because it helps to understand. And this one, oh gosh, I really do wish I had learnt this lesson. And I even today, this morning, when I was preparing for this, I thought, why haven't I learnt this lesson again? How many times do I have to learn this
Yeah.
lesson? And here it is if you need a machine and you don't buy it, you will eventually find that you have paid for it and you don't have it. Okay.
Say that again for us.
Yeah.
Say it again for us. I like it.
If
Yeah.
as a leader or as a business owner or whatever, you need a machine and you don't buy it. So let's say you need, and
Yes.
I class this as software or person or
Yep.
coach or consultant, and you don't buy it, you will ultimately find that you have paid for it and you don't have it. Okay, and this
Love
comes
it.
from Henry Ford, and Clayton Christensen made it kind of interesting. And this one for me is the key for me because, like, I will frequently what I think of as hobbling along on a weeping wound. You got a rock in your shoe, you carry on, you carry on, you carry on, you carry on. You think, yeah, I'll buy that piece of machinery next year, or I'll hire that person in a month's time. I'm too busy. I've got too many things to do. I can carry on hobbling along. And eventually you realise that weeping wound, that little rock in your shoe, has now turned into a bleeding neck, and it's a disaster. And you've paid for it 20 times over. If you'd have only paused long enough to make the right decision at the right time.
Yes.
But that is the thing, isn't it? When does that weeping wound turn into a bleeding neck? And how can we make weeping wounds a bit more visible so that you resolve them before they turn into bleeding necks.
Brilliant. What about number 3?
And number 3, this one. This one, I've got to tell you a story for this one, because this one doesn't. I'm an engineer by background, so I'm an electronics engineer. Okay, so engineering is kind of inbuilt into me, even though, that's not what I do as my day job. And when I started my first company, which was a web design and marketing company, there was one, we grew really quickly. It was 98, 99, and we'd grown really quickly. And that was another of these, oh gosh, I'm a leader. I don't even know what leading, I can't spell leader. Right. And we had these offices in Birmingham, and the offices were like interconnected rooms, and you'd start at one end and walk through the rooms. And I had software engineers, and I had designers, and I had admin people, all these different people working for me. And I came in from a sales call, walked in through the first door, walked through the first room, picked up a person asking me a question, walked through the second room, picked up another person asking me a question, walked through the third room, picked up another. So I had this train of people following me. And I had a mini out of body experience of like, I could see these people following me and asking me questions and needing me to respond because they couldn't do what they wanted to do or needed to do because I was the bottleneck. I was it's called the theory of constraints, but I was the bottleneck in the business. And I actually still wake up sometimes in a cold sweat with that feeling of that kind of train of people all relying on me, all expecting something from me, all asking me questions. It was only a small business and it was such a disaster. Sure. Everybody waiting for me and following me through the office to my office. I was like, just leave me alone. The lesson that I wish I'd learned is fix the bottlenecks. And if you don't know what the bottleneck is, it's you.
Wow. Say that again for us.
So
if you don't know
the bottlenecks in the business, and if you can't see what the bottleneck is, if you don't know what it is, then it's probably you.
Love it. Good. I love those. So you've got these 3 great lessons there. You mentioned your day job is different now from an engineer. How would you describe your day job today?
My day job is helping really smart people get the stuff out of their head and turn it into things. So get the thoughts into things, ideas into assets. And usually, but not always, that's a book.
Yeah, great. And so I love these personal pieces that you've brought through here. Like kind of leading with a small L is one of the ways I think of it. This like so leading when you don't have the title, resolving to take action, which we heard about earlier actually when it came out of your quickfire questions. Sorry, these are my interpretations of your points. Resolving to action and actually recognizing when you're getting in the way as a leader. I think it's really important rather than being facilitator to action. It's great. And you, I guess, practice what you preach in many respects, in that you've taken ideas into action in multiple ways in terms of producing books, amongst many other creative things, I'm sure, but books of your own. So we were speaking before we started. I know you have 12 books that are targeted towards your day job, if I can say. 4 cookery books. Yeah. That you've written. Is that right?
Yeah, 3 cookery books and
3
2 cookery books, 2 guidebooks. They're kind of my Spain side of my business, of my life.
Brilliant. And you've got another book at least one that I know of anyway. You've got another book launching in April.
Yeah, that's called The Credibility Crisis, because I think we've always been on the brink of a credibility crisis. And I think that this year, 2024, is going to sort out the credible from the not credible. And we consultants, leaders, coaches, we need to really focus on taking care of our credibility, and it's something that we nurture, we create, we co-create, we make happen, rather than just accidentally having credibility.
And what does define credibility for me?
When I think of credibility, I think of 2 axes. I think of trust. So people trust you, they know that you're safe, pair of hands, that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. And then I also think on the other axis, desirability. So they actually want to do the things. And so because you can be credible and nobody wants to actually do anything with you. So from a business point of view, I think credibility is a combination of trust and desire. And I think if you're high on just desire, you've probably seen these types of people. So, and it makes me giggle. So if you're low on trust, so you haven't done anything that has built trust or authority in the market, but you've got something really desirable. You've seen these people. I think of them as the bro commerce. So they're just like, yay, buy this book, you're going to get a 6-pack, you're going to fix your relationships, you're going to, your business is going to be brilliant, you're going to be healthy, right, you're going to run a marathon in 2 weeks, okay? So that's kind of like, oh, I would love all of those. I wouldn't, but I would love all of those things. But you're sitting at home on your sofa and you've never run a marathon, and so you've got no trust. And that is kind of one, that's like the high desirability but low trust. And then on the other axis, you've got this high trust but low desirability. And this is what I think for lots of people I see and speak to, I think this is where it's like, hey, I'm a consultant, I do consulting, or I'm a coach, I do coaching. So it's like, yeah, well, you've got the qualifications, you may have even got the clients, you've got the testimonials, but like, I'm not buying consulting, I'm not buying coaching, I'm buying a solution. And the boringness of that, I think, is that scale. What we really want to be credible is high desirability and high trust. And each of those is eroded and being attacked, I suppose, by AI, by low barriers to entry to any type of job these days. So I think that's where I'm seeing the credibility crisis. That makes sense.
Well, that yes, it does, and that's what I was going to ask actually. What's the crisis element to it? What are you seeing happening? So you mentioned artificial intelligence as an aspect of that. What inspired you to bring this out in a book of your own? I guess, was there a trigger event or a point that led to this?
Well, there were multiple triggers. The one I see mostly, whenever I write anything, I'm so selfish. I write it for myself first. So I usually see something, try and fix it. If I've managed to fix it or think I could fix it, then that's what I'll write about, or I'll think about, or I'll talk to other people about. I'll do an event or a workshop, and we'll talk about it. We'll work something out, and then hopefully we'll get closer to a solution. And that's what I've seen with the credibility crisis. Now, from my personal point of view, like, I'm a publisher and a book coach. AI, you can write a book in 5 seconds. Just type the title in. Then don't even type the title in. We'll make the title up for you. Just type in a word, okay? And so I was like, do you know what? That is going to, it's knocking, it's hitting, it's a crisis for the credibility of books. And I bloody love books. Books are my thing. I think books are magic tokens to get you into a new world and to a new way of thinking or doing or being. And I got quite cross. It's like, this is kind of knocking and ruining and destroying the credibility of what I think are little sacred. Books are amazing.
Yes.
And so that's where it started from. I was like, well, why is that making me cross? Why is that irritating me? Why is that? And so then that's when I started kind of developing this idea of, well, I have a high trust quotient. I've been doing this for 20 odd years. And, I've got clients that have been with me for 20 odd years. So I've got a high trust. But desirability, that started feeling like it was taking a knock. And so that's where the idea of the credibility crisis came from. So upping desirability and trust to get credibility.
Yeah, no, I like that. I want to link in a couple of other titles that I love that you've written. Stop writing books nobody reads, and stop selling books nobody buys. In this same point, there's a potential that the bookshelves are being filled with poor quality content. Let's say, so everyone wants to write a book, right? Everyone's got a book in them. Is the quote? Everybody wants to write a book, but are they worth reading? So stop writing books nobody reads. There feels like there's there's a tension here that the AI could generate stuff that's poor, but also humans could generate stuff that's poor. How do you help us to close the quality gap?
Yeah, that's a really nice way of thinking about it. So there definitely is a quality gap. It's like the danger zone. And I think what's happening at the moment, and what's happening before AI, we can't blame AI just for this, because you're absolutely right. Everybody's got a book in them. Anybody who wrote a book then turns into a book coach and then taught other people to write books. And we have all these crazy sayings like it's like a calling card, slam it on the desk and rah. And there was kind of like desire was built up for books, but without trust. And then I think I got trust, but I was low on desire. And I was like, well, why don't I just say, write a book in a week? Because it won't be a good book. It's very unlikely that if you write a book in a week, it will be a good book. I think of writing, I don't know if you think of this, Simon, as well. Writing is how I think. If I don't have pens in my hands, if I'm not writing stuff down, I can't think. But I also think thinking without creating is not thought leadership, that's just thinking. If we want to be a leader and we want to be a thought leader and we want to make a difference, we want to change what people do, how they think, how they feel, how they behave, if we want to solve problems for them, then we have to get out of here into something that other people can see.
The way in which you help with that, I want to get into in a second. But if I've understood, part of this is helping somebody perhaps to be confident enough or just courageous enough to start moving from just some thought process to some element of action. Again, here it comes. This seems to be a bit of a theme of our conversation. Thought through to creative work, to get moving on something, to get creating something rather than just thinking about something.
Absolutely, because I think that's only when it gets out of here into the world in however it gets there. So it could be a lecture, or it could be a white paper, or it could be an event, or it could be a book, or it could be a podcast. However it gets out of here into the world, that is the only way you're going to get feedback. And I'm an engineer. We have to have feedback loops. It's the law. And we have to get feedback. We have to bring something back in to either validate or to change course, or to fix any errors, or to actually tell you it's a stupid idea. That's also good feedback.
Yeah, that's the thought. What is it? Have you ever been in the situation where you say, do you know what? There isn't a book in you. Everybody's got a book in them, but sorry,
except you.
I think you've got something else. You maybe have a song or a dance, but you don't have a book. Have you ever had that situation?
I have. I am undiplomatic enough to have actually said it pretty much like that.
Right.
And it went down well, actually, because I think people have been sold a bit of a dream that everybody's got a book in them, and you're just going to get it out of you and, tell your story, leave a legacy, blah, blah, blah. I think you might have a book in you, but first of all, does anybody actually want to read it? And if they don't, then do that creation in the way that they want to take it rather than a book. So, make a video, do a course, do an event. If you've got good thoughts, then get them out there. Books might be the right way, but if the people aren't readers, then books are not the right way. You need to get it out to them how they need it. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, books, if you do them well, require an investment of money and time and tears. If you do it with me, they do anyway. You have to give it something. And so just, if you're not prepared for that process and you're not prepared for that feedback, because it's the feedback that makes books good, then you're not at the right emotional level or emotional comfort. Then you probably shouldn't do a book. But you might, maybe in the future.
I mean, it depends on how long it's a piece of string. But let's say, I have an idea and I want to get it through to a book. What kind of time span would I be looking at, do you think? And I'm not talking about war and peace here, but just maybe some principles around 3 lessons that I wish I'd learned earlier, for example. If that was
the first thing is, I believe, and a bit like we talked about earlier about getting the podcast to be the right length for consumption. I think books have ended up being too long, and they've ended up being too long because people used to get paid for the number of words they wrote rather than the number of value they gave. Okay, so I think first of all, that's the first step I would talk about, which is, it does not have to be 50,000 or 60,000 words. It could actually be 20,000 words. It could actually be 5,000 words if it delivers on the promise of the book. So that's the first thing, which is bring it to one atomic idea. The second
Yeah.
part is what most people don't do, because we are thinking all the time, human beings, well, how we are, we're thinking all the time. We think by the time we say, right, I'm ready to write a book, we've done all the thinking. I think the moment you say, right, I'm ready to write a book, is when the thinking starts. Okay, so
Yeah.
that bit, the more time you put into that thinking and getting feedback before you start writing, the better chance you've got of a book that people will read and that people will refer and that people will tell everyone else about. Okay, so that's the second part. So first part, atomic. Second part, do more thinking than you think you should. And then the third part to this kind of timing is, once you've done that thinking and you've got proof of, you've had that feedback, so you've gone through the loop multiple times, the writing is easy. And that's the bit where people go, oh, I don't know if I can be a writer. Well, you have to be a thinker and an explainer of ideas first. Once you've thought and explained and had feedback, then the writing is easy, because that is where you can get assistance. But it's the idea that has to come from you, and that has to have a few times around the brain cycle.
That's really helpful. That's really helpful. I really like the way you've explained that. There's a question that's been on my mind for about 10 minutes. Why is this so important to you? What, like, you've got a farm, you've got animals, that kind of stuff. You could be doing other things. You've clearly had various talents that you've taken different pathways. Why this for you?
The sort of the long, big, deep reason is, when I was 13, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write, I don't know, fantasy. You know, I was into Tolkien and all that sort of stuff, and I wanted to write fantasy. And when I went to careers day, I said to the careers teacher, when she said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be a writer. And she said, there are no jobs for writers. And so that's why I ended up being an engineer, just to annoy her. From then, from 13, I wasn't a writer for 10 years. I was an engineer, and then I started a marketing and design company, and then I ended up writing a book. And so from my point of view, I think lots of us have that little, when we're a kid, you know, when you think, what do I want to do? I want to be a writer, or I want to be an artist, or I want to be an astronaut. I wanted to be an astronaut as well, but there was no jobs for astronauts, none whatsoever. I think it goes, if I go right back, it's because of that, which is I wanted to be a writer and I was told I couldn't. So I'm a bit of a pain in the bum. But I think from a business point of view, so from the sort of like logical forward thinking point of view, I think it's because still books are the best way of sharing an idea with people. Yes, you can get people round the fireside and do the mouth to ear type, you know, the sharing a story, sharing an idea. But books have this magic thing, because they go and they sit in somebody's house with the person, or on the loo, depending on where you read. You know, I'm not judging you, but you're there with one book, and you're connected to that reader, and there's just something so powerful about that opportunity.
Yeah, it's interesting. I went upstairs earlier. My wife was cleaning out her study, and we got a ton of books in there. And she's thinking, actually, some of these I want to move on, you know, just cluttering, because we've got others moved in. There's some, like, we've got a set of Agatha Christie novels, which many of she's read many times, but she said, I can't move those on. They've got to stay. They've got to stay here, because there's an opportunity I might go in there. I love the fact that you can return to a book and kind of read the same story, of course, and there's some things you'll pick up that you didn't the first time. But actually, there's a new journey to be had by the same story that you've read before. I read mostly non-fiction, as it happens, but similar thing. There's ideas that you remember, and then you go back again and read some more, and wow, that's a great insight. I was talking about Nancy Klein's book, A Time to Think, with somebody just over the weekend, and just the impact that had on me, as an example. And it was lovely, and you know, he wrote it down on his phone actually he bought it on Amazon as a consequence of my recommendation. But I just remember the power of that in stretching my own thinking around how I was as a coach, and actually how I was as a listener more broadly. And it was so helpful, looking at the quality of my questions and all these kind of things. And and to your point, books have that capacity to expand. There's other vehicles that can do that too, but I was immersed in her thinking and her thoughts, I guess, for a couple of weeks as I read that. And it gives time for incubation between the reading phases for those things to settle and then emerge and maybe put into practice and come back and explore some more the thinking. So she did a very good job with me of kind of inviting me into her thinking environment and it helping me to hopefully help others.
I think
with
you're
that
so
too.
right, because I think non-fiction books, business books, leadership books, non-fiction books, sometimes we might read them, like, you know, and then a year later you might read it again, or you might come back to it, or something just sticks there. When you come back to it, it's like meeting an old friend again. That's how I think of when I reread a business book. And you come back to these books that you might have read. You know, I like, you know, some of the like How to Make Friends and Influence People. I mean, that one's been around for a million years. And, you know, those books, and you read them again and you kind of like these tiny little things, that new things. And I think as well, you know, when there's like a saying, isn't there, when the pupil is ready, the teacher will appear. I think I think books are brilliant for that, because you might read them and then a year later or 5 years later or 10 or 20 years later, you might read them again and it's different. You're a different person.
What would be a recommendation that you'd have for us? I'm not saying this is your favorite book ever, but just that's one in your mind at the moment that you would recommend outside of your own great work, of course.
Of
Debs.
course,
I know
thank
it's
you
tough.
for that. One of the books that I reread, I'll tell you the book I reread.
Yeah.
The Engineer in Me. It's called The Goal by Eli Goldratt. Okay. And I reread this every couple of years. It's a story book, but it explains the theory of constraints. And I really love the theory of constraints. I would just sit, or if I had nothing else to do, I would sit all day and read about the theory of constraints. That's really sad, but it's true. And this book is like a storybook. It tells a story of a leader who's trying to run her factory, and his wife wants to leave him, and it's all a disaster. And then he meets a mentor, and the mentor helps him understand. And so it's kind of like a nice little fable. And I read that every couple of years, and I could probably quote bits of it, you know, because I've read it so many times. But that for me is a really good book because of it's kind of like a Trojan horse type book, you know?
Yes.
Read a nice story and learn about engineering and manufacturing and the theory of constraints. I like those types of books.
Yeah, so do I. There's an author, Spencer Johnson, who I find has Kenneth Blanchard actually is very similar, kind of using the more kind of parable kind of way of getting the learning across. Patrick Lencioni does a similar thing in some of his books too. And yeah, so I like that form amongst others.
Yeah.
Great. Well, Debs, we have reached the concluding parts of our conversation. It's been lovely to meet you more deeply and to understand the work you do. And I love this emphasis that you have and that you'll focus on in your next book around the credibility crisis as well. When's that due to be published?
That should be out in April. Okay, she says enthusiastically.
We heard it here. Commitment. So credibility crisis, and this pushing on the dials of kind of trust and desirability is a really nice way of looking at that credibility concept. And who are you hoping picks that up?
I'm hoping the type of people that would pick this up would be those types of consultants who are smart. They've been around a while. You know, maybe they're like in their 50s, and you know, they've got so much left to give still, and yet they're feeling a push from all different directions. And it's for those types of people. They've still got, you know, something brilliant to share. They just need to get the right balance to keep that credibility high.
I wish you the best of success with that, and I love the concepts that you're trying to convey. Thank you for bringing so much great energy to this conversation. It's lovely to meet you, and I'm maybe a little closer to thinking I actually have a book within me.
Oh, I'm sure you do. I'm absolutely 100% sure you do. And I would tell you, as you know, if you didn't.
I've got a song in me, but I'm not sure there's a book yet.
And the dance. Let's do the dance.
Yeah, that's right. Debs, thanks so much, and I wish you the best in your other pursuits as well, with your farm and all your other interests. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom, and wish you the very best in. You said you were continuing with that, resolving to take action now. I love that quote from Henry Ford. That's resonated with me today, and there's some things I need to take action as a result of this conversation. So thank you.
Lovely to meet you, Simon. Thank you.
Look forward to meeting again in the future.
Ciao.
When you help me with
your
my
book.
book.
Yay!
Your work is done.
Ta-da.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Our after dinner leadership conversation is finished. Our guest has left, and you're still here. Now, of course, you're very welcome. I'm glad that you found the conversation to be engaging. There's a few things that I'd like to ask you to do before you do leave. The first one of those is, if you can stop and think about somebody who you think would enjoy this conversation, a friend, a colleague, perhaps an aspiring leader. The second thing is to stop and hit subscribe or follow. And then the third thing is to start doing something. Perhaps there's a little idea or a concept that we've been discussing today that you think you could apply even a little bit tomorrow, tonight, and to put it into action. I encourage you to use this as a catalyst to do something different, do something more interesting, do something more exciting. And thank you so much for joining us. And please tune in again for another after dinner leadership conversation. You can leave now. I need to go and do the dishes.